So again, welcome everybody to our conversation today. And I'm very happy to introduce Samuel Ayim from Accra, Ghana, who is the first coach today who is going to introduce his coaching model, a work that in our academy we usually promote. We usually encourage our coaches to prepare in order to allow them to express their own connection with coaching. So Samuel, the screen and the community is all yours, and we are so happy to hear what you have to share.
Thank you so much, Christina, and good afternoon or evening to my friends. And thank Christina and Agatha for the training and support. So it's afternoon in my end. So I said this afternoon, I'm going to share my coaching model, which with the support of Christina, I have come to this stage. So I would appreciate your comments and feedback after the presentation. So my coaching model that I've come to is called the Anansesem Coaching Model. Maybe you want to practice how to say it. It's Anansesem. It's very easy the way it is written. Anansesem Coaching Model, or to be easy, the A5Cs Coaching Model. And Anansesem simply means Anansi stories. And those of you may be familiar with West Africa, particularly Ghana, you would probably have heard about Anansi stories. Now, Anansi is actually the spider. So that's why you have the spider there. The Anansi is the local name or the Akan name for spider. So Anansesem is the stories about the spider. And why the Anansesem? This Anansi stories are very powerful stories that are used in the Ghanaian culture by way of training and learning. And as we were growing up, typically you would have, the family or the village sit around the fire and tell stories about Anansesem. And Anansi was always the key character, the center of the stories. That's why it's called the Anansesem. He's the hero. He's always the one around whom the stories are told. So that is that model of learning is what inspired me to use that to try to see the correlations between Anansi stories, learning process, and the coaching learning process. Try as much as possible to fit it with the ICF models that we are learning in this academy. So I personally grew up in a typical village. Okay, so I grew up in a typical village. My first 13 years, I walked barefooted to the nearest school, which was 7-8 kilometers away from my village. I'll walk and come back to my village. And when I came back to the village, I'll go to the farm to meet my mom and get some foodstuffs, and we'll come and do our dinner, which was always fufu. Those of you, when you come to Ghana, I'll give you fufu. You know what fufu is. So, and after we finish our dinner, we would typically sit around the fire and tell stories. And these stories are also supposed to help you clear off the day, but also to learn principles of life, to address challenges in life. And the elderly will usually sit by, listen to everybody participate in this Anansi story. And everybody was encouraged to learn and tell Anansi stories because they always contained some moral lessons. And as I've said, Anansi with the spider was always the hero, the center of the story. And so this is the background to the Anansi stories. So usually Anansi was a very cunning creature, and in Anansi stories, there's a lot of personifications, the use of, animals talking, trees talking, snakes, all sort of images are used, and they are personified. So Anansi, for example, is personified. It's a creature, but it's made as a human being, and it's behaving and talking and so on. That's how the stories are. So if I may just give you just one small Anansi story, just to give you an idea of how they work. I'll give you a short one, not a long one. So, so one of the popular Anansi stories is Anansi goes to the farm with his 3 children. He always has 3 children. He has a wife. So he goes and they found pawpaw, 3 pawpaw, ripe pawpaw on the pawpaw tree. So they plucked the pawpaw down. And one of his children asked, "Daddy, how are we going to share this pawpaw? There are only 3 and we are 4 of us. So how do we share it?" So Anansi, thinking through it, would say, well, if I say I'm giving half to my children, they would think that I've cheated them. So how do I do it in a way that they are so happy and they don't feel cheated? Nobody feels cheated. So Anansi said, okay, my children, you know what we are going to do? There are 3 of you. Each one of you should take 1 pawpaw. And now what will you do? Each one of you share your pawpaw with daddy. So the children are happy, everybody takes 1, and everybody is happy to share his pawpaw with daddy. In the end, Anansi gets 1.5 pawpaw, and each of the children gets half. And nobody feels cheated because they willingly gave their pawpaw and they share it according to. So when this story is told, then the moral, people would start to ask questions. So why did Anansi do this? Why did he not just take 1.5? Why did Anansi not just tell his children, I'm the older one, so I'll take more? And the whole group will start asking the storyteller such questions, and the storyteller would clarify, would try to bring. And then from those questions, lessons will be drawn and people will take away various lessons that they will apply. So that's a typical Anansi story that I could share. There are thousands, every Ghanaian child, who, especially those of us who grew up in the village, have thousands of Anansi stories dealing with different aspects of life, sometimes very complicated situation Anansi finds himself. All right, so that is the system of learning we grew, and I decided to use that to typify a bit of the coaching model. As I've said, everybody participates in the Anansi storytelling. Anansi is always the hero. Anansi is always very reflective and thinking, how do I overcome the challenge, the seeming difficulty around the problem that I'm facing, and so forth. This system encourages active listening because everybody who is listening has to be very active. And sometimes when the storyteller is telling the story, and because so many people know the story, so if you're telling the story and you're not telling it the way that people knew it, people will come back and they will have a song, and there's a typical song that would be sung to draw your attention to the fact that, you know, you are deviating a bit, come back home, tell the story well. And also there's other stories, when you're telling the story well, they will clap for you and they will sing that song to encourage you, to show that, yes, you're doing very well. And at the end, they would ask you challenging questions. They will ask you, why did this happen? Why is it not done this way? Why was this done? What do you think is the issue here? So those challenging questions come. And at the end, we have the moral lessons that are drawn. And some people have said, because of the very, smart ways that Anansi used to do solve his problems, people thought that some of the lessons were not very good morally, because he would sometimes use different methods that are not seen to be typically moral. But the point is that he has a fix, he has a problem, and he has to solve it. How does he go about it? All right. Good. So from this background, I tried to look at Anansesem storytelling and coaching. How can we draw a certain parallel? So we know that in coaching, client is the center of action. The client is the one who has the agenda. The client is the one who is coming with his goals and his objectives to the session. And here, we also know that coaching involves asking questions, open-ended questions, reflections internally to help the client to enhance his potential. So there's a partnership here. It involves personal growth and awareness. The coaching process is to facilitate awareness, learning, and growth. So that is the coaching process. And this process, if you look at Anansi stories, they have quite a dose of these elements. So when you look at Anansi story and coaching, again, here, Anansi is the center of the story. He's the client. I put it, Anansi is the client. He's always the one who has issues, who has something to deal with, and is coming to the story with that. Then there is always a perceived challenge. It can be a growth, it can be a problem, it can be an obstacle, but for Anansi, that's something he has to deal with, which is what the client will always come with, something they want to deal with. The coach knows it, but the client can come with the challenge in different ways, and it's for the coach now to distill and to help steer the affairs. Then there is also the storyteller. So the story, everybody can tell a story. And when you finish your story, you pass it to somebody and you tell his story. So there's always the storyteller. And the storyteller is the one who is bringing Anansi and his story into the learning process. And that storyteller represents for me the level of consciousness. Because once the storyteller is telling the story, when he's doing well, people will affirm him and encourage him. When he's not doing well, people will have a kind of indirect way of singing and the person. So that process brings a certain awareness, not only to the storyteller, but to everybody else. So everybody else around, the people who are listening and encouraging, I represent them by the coach because they're the ones listening attentively to the storyteller. They're the ones who would ask questions. They're the ones who are encouraging. They're the ones who are creating the environment. So everybody else represents the coach. Then finally, at the end of every story, there is conclusion. What is the lesson here? And for me, that lesson compared to coaching is the way forward. What are you going to do? The action plan, the conclusion that the coach has to help to bring. So from this, I developed what I'll call the Anansesem Coaching Model, which is the A5Cs. A representing Anansesem, which is story. In every coaching session, there are stories going on, stories in the mind of the client, stories that are told, the stories that are not told. And the client brings all that into. So coaching, there's quite a lot of stories going on. Whether it is in silence or not silence, the way they're feeling, there's always a story behind. And the coach has to discern what stories are going on and to use it to help. So the A represents the stories, Anansesem, and the 5 C's represent the elements of the learning process. So A is Anansesem. C, the first C represents the client, who in this case is the key character, Anansi. And C represents the goal, the objective that the client brings into the session. And the next C is the coach, who has to now play a supporting partnership role and creates the enabling environment, asking the right questions, using the right to support and challenge to be able to bring the awareness to the situation. Then the C is the whole process of consciousness, awareness that the coaching process should bring out. So that is the fourth C. And the fifth C is finally the conclusion. At the end of the day, try to close the coaching session with actionable goals that the client would pick from all the story and from all the learning to go forward. So that, in brief, is the Anansesem Coaching Model. And I hope that you have enjoyed it, and I hope it makes sense to all of us. And I would appreciate your feedback and your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samuel, for this unique and personal presentation that comes from who you are, from your culture, your story. And it's always very exciting to see the presentation of each coach in this academy, because it speaks about your uniqueness. So thank you very much. It was such an interesting presentation. I just stopped the recording now so that we can share a little bit before moving to Willy's presentation of his coaching model.
This is our Sunlight Academy. If you want to become a certified life coach and find out more about our accredited coaching education, be part of our global community and learn about our programs, you can visit our website, sunlight.academy, and get in touch with us. We are more than happy to meet you.